Yeah, first and foremost, give all praise and honor and glory to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his son Hamashiach, who some call Yahushua, Yeshua, Yehoshua, we mostly know as Jesus Christ. I wanted to briefly speak on the Samaritans. I know we spoke on a little more about who are the Samaritans, who are they, and the Samaritan was it an Israelite. I did a lesson a year or two ago. The Samaritans, you can go watch that video. You just type it in the search bar, and you can watch the video of the Samaritans if you interested in the whole class. All right, it's an hour and a half. We going through the PowerPoints. We'll just go ahead and read some of the history, and then you just suit for yourself. You try to figure it out for yourself. And salute to brother Dave. He gave me he put the the a source from Josephus also and how he spoke on the Samaritans. I know I said I was gonna look into that, but the brother already did the work and sent me the source for that. We'll go over a little information that I had already inside of this PowerPoint presentation that we did a few years ago. Salute the Hebrew Elevation too. I see. I went back to the class. See, he was in the class also, man. So he been tuning in a few years now. Salute to that brother. Um, Pure blood. Okay, according to the Encyclopedic Dictionary of the Bible by Lewis F. Hartman, CSSR, will probably went feelings of ill will probably went back before the separation of the northern and southern Jewish kingdoms. Even there was a lack of unity between the tribes of Jacob. After the separation of Judah and Israel in the 9th century, King Omri of the northern kingdom bought a hill of Samaria from Shemer. 1 Kings 16:24. He built there the city of Samaria, which became his capital. It was strong defensively and controlled the valley through which the main road ran between Jerusalem and Galilee. In 722 BC, the city fell to the Assyrians and became the headquarters of the Assyrian province Samarina. While many of the inhabitants of the city and the surrounding area of Samaria were led off into captivity, some
Samaritans
formers,
and became the headquarters.
oh, hold on, some formers and others were left behind. They intermarried with the new settlers from Mesopotamia and Syria. All right, so when it says, and they took them all into captivity, a lot of times they still would leave back the weak, the poor. Um, they only wanted the strong. You see a reference to that with Daniel, with Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and Daniel when he not wanted to eat. Um, they took the brightest, and he didn't want to eat certain foods. He wanted to be, just eat, herbs and lettuce and water. But the guard was worried that it's gonna make him look malnourished and so forth, and it's gonna get him in trouble. But they only wanted the smartest, the brightest, the people that's gonna add, to the military or add that has something of value. And they left the poor, the farmers, and women, children, etc. All right, they intermarried with new settlers, and those people intermarried with some of the people that were there, um, that were brought in from Mesopotamia and Syria. Though the Samaritans were condemned by the Jews, Hartman says they probably had as much Jewish blood as the Jews who later returned from the Babylonian exile. I mentioned the Ezra 4. Um, I think it's Ezra 4. I keep saying that, but I hadn't went back and looked. But it's in Ezra where um, Jews coming back from the Babylonian captivity wouldn't allow these people to help them build the temple. They wouldn't allow them to do it. Says this has nothing to do with you, and actually called them adversaries. Should go back and look at that, or you can go to this and listen to this class. I think I'm pretty sure I mentioned it. Um, Let me go up a little more. But he's saying, hey, when they came back, they were probably just as mixed as the Samaritans. Good Samaritan. Here's the next slide here, and well, no, I don't want that. Y'all know the story. It's Good Samaritan. The hate continues. Meanwhile, the Samaritans who had resisted paganism developed their own version of worship, only using only the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and rejecting all other books of the Old Testament. Tensions increased when the Samaritans built their own temple for worship on Mount Gerizim, and stated that their mountain was the dwelling place of the Lord, not the temple in Jerusalem. With that, any hope of reconciliation between the two peoples was lost. According to John Mackenzie, in his dictionary of the Bible, the Samaritans later allied themselves with the Seleucids in the Maccabean Wars in 128 BCE. The Jews destroyed the Samaritan temple and ravaged the territory. See this? All right, during the and this is very important that we understand and know and try to get as much history we can leading up to the time of Christ, so you can understand the political climate of of those areas before we start making all of these assumptions and have all these pre-notions that we're bringing in into the text. But you see there, the Samaritans allied themselves with the Seleucids in the Maccabean Wars in 128 BC. All right, the Jews destroyed the Samaritan temple and ravaged the territory. Around the time of Jesus' birth, a hand of Samaritans profaned the temple in Jerusalem by scattering the bones of dead people in the sanctuary. In our own era, which has witnessed the vandalism of synagogues and burning of black churches, we should be able to understand the anger and hate such acts would incite. The fact that there was such dislike and hostility between Jews and Samaritans is what gives the use of the Samaritan in the parable of the Good Samaritan such force. Samaritan is the one who is able to rise above the bigotry and prejudice of centuries and show mercy and compassion for the injured Jew after the Jew's own countrymen passed them by. Excuse me, y'all. I'm still under this weather. It is with those centuries of opposition. Hold on. It is with those centuries of opposition and incidents behind their people that we can understand the surprise of the Samaritan woman when Jesus arises above the social and religious restrictions, not just of man talking to a woman, but also a Jew talking to a Samaritan. By the first century, and most likely long before, both Jewish and Samaritan priests taught their people that it was sinful to have any contact with the other Jews, Jews were to avoid the impure land of the Samaritans, and Samaritans were not to speak to Jews. In addition, Samaritans and the Jews fed their mutual hatred with insult and injury. All right, this thing it seems like it's a little blurry, and it's this kind of small. Y'all bear with me. Insult. Jews called the Samaritans a herd, not a nation. A widely used Jewish proverb stated that a piece of bread given by a Samaritan is more unclean than swine's flesh. Sometime early in the first century, Samaritans threw human bones into the temple of Jerusalem on the day of Passover. This heinous act, according to the Jews, defiled the sanctuary, making it impossible to celebrate the most important feast of the year. The worst insult that a Jew could use was to call someone a Samaritan, such as in John 8:48, when the hostile Pharisees answered Jesus by saying, "Are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and are possessed?" So in John 8:48, you'll see the Pharisees insulting Christ, calling him a demonic Pharisee. I'm sorry, a demonic Samaritan. All right, they was trying to insult him, and that was like one of the greatest insults you could. You not only are you a demon and a devil, but you're also a Samaritan. You're a Samaritan demon. All right, that was John 8:48. In 128 BC, the leader of Judea, John Hyrcanus, completely destroyed the or Hyrcanus completely destroyed the Samaritan temple. The Samaritans rebuilt it in 100 years later and continued their blasphemous sacrifices. All right, I did not mention that that he did destroy it, the Samaritan capital, um, but the Samaritans rebuilt it 100 years later and continued their blasphemous sacrifices. Samaritans were known to lie in wait for Jews traveling from Galilee to Jerusalem for the feast days. Sometimes these attacks escalated into death, and in at least one instance, Rome intervened. As a result, Galileans, except for Jesus, used a longer route on the other side of the Jordan. They would go around. The ruling Roman legions could hardly distinguish Jews from Samaritans. Very hard to distinguish the two. This is what the sources said. But they didn't keep the two groups from using. That didn't keep the two groups from using Rome against each other. Some Samaritan men would enlist in the Roman auxiliary troops for a chance to legally harass their Jewish neighbors. Both groups are said to have bribed Roman soldiers to persecute the other. Keeping this long-running feud in mind, Jesus' contact with the Samaritan woman at the well was not only surprising, it was shocking. And his parable of the Good Samaritan was not a gentle story, but a stinging insult to the Pharisees. All right, just one more, y'all. One more slide, and then we'll read this source, and then we'll get up out of here. Well, that might have been it. That might have been it, y'all. You see, oh, and then I even had, a little clip from brother saying he was a Samaritan in their temple and all of that stuff. Yeah, that was it. That was it for there. That was it for that. Let me go back here. And I'll read this source real quick. Hold on. Let me try to make it a little bigger. You see the Antiquities of the Jews? It's from from Josephus here. And we'll read this. We'll try to read it. Let me make it a little bigger. Make it a little bigger here. It says, so when Alexander had thus settled matters at Jerusalem, he led his army into the neighboring cities. And when all the inhabitants to whom he had came received him with great kindness, the Samaritans, who had then Shechem for their metropolis, a city situate at Mount Gerizim and inhabited by apostates of the Jewish nation. All right, what's an apostate? They were labeled apostates. This was something too that the early church or the Catholic Church would would label certain people apostate if they didn't believe in certain doctrines. Seeing that Alexander had so greatly honored the Jews, determined to profess themselves Jews. All right, look at what he's saying here. All right, seeing that Alexander had greatly honored the Jews, determined to profess themselves Jews. So since they knew Alexander was a little lenient and tried to do right by the Jews, then if something good's happening, they will profess to be Jews. They will say, "Yeah, we Jews also." Um, for such is the disposition of the Samaritans, as we have already elsewhere declared, that when the Jews are in adversity, they deny they are kin to them. Okay, and then they confess the truth. Okay, and that's what they said. Hey, and Josephus said, "Hey, man, that's the truth of the matter." But he's a Jew, and he has that same hatred that all first, I ain't gonna say all, but that most first century Jews had. I mean, we ain't got nothing to do with them. That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying during their time. They're not our people. You know what I'm saying? Let me read it again. So when Alexander had thus settled matters at Jerusalem, he led his army into neighboring cities, and when all the inhabitants to whom excuse me, y'all, of whom came received all the inhabitants to whom he came received him with great kindness. The Samaritans who had then Shechem for their metropolis, seeing that Alexander was so greatly honored, seeing that Alexander had so greatly honored the Jews, determined to profess themselves Jews. For such is the disposition of the Samaritans, as we have already elsewhere declared, that when the Jews are in adversity, they deny that they are kin to them, and then they confess the truth. When do they confess the truth? When they deny that they're kin to them. All right, and they do this when adversity comes. Again, this is a Jewish source. All right, so there's a little bias there with that. You know what I'm saying? But just take everything that we just went over, and and then you come to your conclusion. Um, Hold on. It says, but when they perceive that some good fortune has befallen them, they immediately pretend to have communion with them, saying that they belong to them and derive their genealogy from the posterity of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh. All right. So when something good is gonna happen, they profess that that they're from the northern kingdom. All right. And so one thing we can say is that the Jews know exactly who these people are. I ain't gonna say they know they know the history of these people. They know the history of Samaritans just like we're reading it. But they was there with them. They, some of these writers, they were there in the midst of this. They had the history, but we seen it. We can see that these Jews felt a certain way about these Samaritans and didn't deal with them like that. Like I said, they converted the Edomites, but they were just disgusted at these Samaritans. But take all the information, look at it, and go check out the video, and do your own research. Do your own research, and that's why I let it go too when the brother came to me. Hold on, y'all. When the brother captain uh when he was just determined to say that she's a Jew or Israelite, I really wasn't tripping like that. I ain't gonna trip on it and just say, man, no, man, that's just guaranteed that she was it's possible that she was Northern Kingdom. It's very possible, but it's very possible that she wasn't. If they've intermarried for 700 years, and they're not, and they have this beef, how does that blood stay pure? But at the same time, that's speculation, fluff. And you can say the same thing too about the Jews coming out of Babylon, and how they mixed in, those little 70 plus years they were there. But again, pray this thing was edifying. Y'all be blessed. We'll see y'all on the next one.